nói là lúc cổ liên tu nước thì có gì cho sẽ có trò nhau rộng rãi ít trồng này chỉ cái tên là thiết trong bây giờ mà chùa xuân số tú của nhà Rachel và là cụ tồn đó ít tu chẳng sự sơ chế cho tu chẳng sự nhất trong đồng Wausau ở Wisconsin sĩ thả cho trong đời điên là gia trong plong tu giờ lý rất trong một cái thứ thì là sẽ cho cái sĩ thả nhất trong đặc căn nó xin chỉ đối bia lúc cổ mình đưa thì có gì cho sẽ có trò cụ tồn đó ít tu chẳng sự sơ chế cho tu chẳng sự nhất trong đồng Wausau ở Wisconsin sĩ thả cho điên là gia trong plong tu chắc tới đôi cho nên chỉ có tin trả thế cho sai sự đời nhất đối với nói tiề cho nên từ chụp bao luôn mấy cả rong có lực tụ bắt sai trong nên tiếng gà xiết cho cái sự thay nhất rồi nó. Hi Todd, welcome to SUAB HMONG News. First of all, I would like to thank you for your time by being here with us tonight to talk about a little bit about Dylan Yang's case. I would like you to give tell us a little bit about the Wausau Police Department report on the Dylan Yang's case.
I'm Lieutenant Todd Baeten with the Wausau Police Department, and I'm joined by Captain Ben Bliven and Officer Houa, one of our patrol officers here. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about circumstances surrounding the Dylan Yang case. As many people know, the sentencing hearing for Dylan is occurring tomorrow, October 19th, here in Marathon County Circuit Court. And I know that there's been a lot of emotion and a lot of discussion and frankly, some misunderstandings surrounding these proceedings. And we were just hoping for an opportunity to clarify some things potentially about that case. I guess, first of all, there's been a lot of question and wondering as to why Dylan's case was tried in adult court. I've heard things similar to why was it decided to move this case into adult court and things of that nature. When the reality is, there's certain crimes in the state of Wisconsin when committed by anybody that's 10 years of age or older, those cases automatically go or originate in adult court. Those cases would be first or second degree intentional homicide or first degree reckless homicide, which is the charge that Dylan Yang was charged with. So because he was charged with first-degree reckless homicide, and he's over 10 years old, his case automatically went or started in adult court. Now, Dylan and his attorney had the opportunity to ask or petition the court to move that case down into juvenile court through a process called a reverse waiver hearing, but for whatever reason, they opted not to do that. So because of that, that case stayed in adult court. This was not a decision made by the police department. It was not a decision made by the district attorney's office. This was a statutory mandate that Dylan Yang's case be in adult court unless petitioned by his attorney and him to move it down into juvenile court. So that was one of the big misunderstandings, I think, in this case overall. Additionally, I guess I would like to clarify or maybe give some additional details about the case in general, just so people have a better understanding of what really happened that day. I know that this case has sparked some widespread interest. Many people following the case or many who have heard of it are not from this area, and so they might not be completely familiar with all of the details. On February 27th of 2015, there were two boys that had planned to fight at an area park here in Wausau. Now, one boy was a friend of Dylan Yang, and one boy was a friend of the victim in this case, Isaiah Powell. When Dylan had heard that this fight was going to take place, Dylan chose to reach out to this other boy and kind of get involved with this conversation or argument surrounding this planned fight. At one point, Dylan was kind of challenging this other kid, saying if he wanted to fight his friend, that this boy needed to kind of come through Dylan first, something to that effect. Eventually, Isaiah Powell joined in on that argument, and a lot of text messages and Facebook messages were exchanged, which eventually resulted in Dylan inviting Isaiah or challenging Isaiah and his friends to come over to Dylan's house to we assume, continue that conversation or that argument. Eventually, Isaiah Powell did show up at Dylan Yang's house. Isaiah was accompanied by a few friends. They exchanged words with Dylan and two of his friends who were on the porch waiting for Isaiah to come. At one point, Isaiah produced a BB gun that he had on his person, and he began firing a BB gun in the direction of Dylan's house. This incident occurred about 120 feet away from Dylan's front porch, so it wasn't on his property, it wasn't on the sidewalk in front of his house, it wasn't on the porch at all, it was actually down the street. Dylan's friend realized that this was not a real handgun and began running toward Isaiah Powell. They began fighting in the street. Dylan started running toward their location and then realized that he did not have a knife that he previously had brought out onto the porch with him. So he returned to the house, retrieved the knife, ran back to where his friend and Isaiah were now fighting in the street. That fight was now starting to end when Dylan came up and then stabbed Isaiah Powell 2 times in the back, which ultimately resulted in Isaiah's death. Following that incident, Dylan and his friends went back into Dylan's house, where they called Dylan's older brother and requested a ride to a school dance. At no time did Dylan or any of his friends call for assistance. The police were never notified of this incident from any of the participants, not at that time, rather. They did not seek to render aid. Again, they looked for a ride to go to a school dance. When Dylan's older brother became aware of the incident that happened, as they were driving to the dance, he turned the vehicle back around and brought them back home and contacted parents. And it was the parents that eventually contacted police detectives who, by that time, were out near the scene of the physical confrontation. They were able to detect some blood in the snow, and they found the BB gun nearby in the snow, and were then approached by Dylan and his mother to indicate that they had been involved in this incident. Now, during Dylan's early contact with police detectives, the detectives were able to speak with him briefly, speak with his mother. They consented to have Dylan transported to the Wausau Police Department to provide some further information and a statement about this incident. So Dylan was transported there, where he spoke with investigators at length. So for probably a few hours or so, he was given a meal. He was allowed to use the restroom. He was given frequent breaks and drinks. And then eventually, when she was able to join us, Dylan's mother responded to the police department and was brought immediately into the interview room with him. And shortly after that interview was concluded. So I think those were really some of the main details of the case and some of the misunderstandings that maybe not everybody has that has been following this case somewhat.
One of the biggest question and puzzling Hmong individual in the Hmong community is about the case between Dan Pop and Dylan Yang. Dan Pop killed 3 people here in Milwaukee, and his bond is $150,000, but Dylan Yang's is $1 million. How do you explain this thing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, obviously, I'm not the judge that set the bail, and I'm not exactly sure what types of standards are used in other areas of the state or in the country. But I can tell you that here in the Wausau area, out of our last 7 homicide suspects, 3 of them have had bonds set at $1 million. 3 of them have had bonds set at $250,000, and 1 of them had a bond set at $2 million. So yes, I understand that in Dylan Yang's case, that bond of $1 million seems inordinately high, but when we compare it with 6 other homicides that have occurred here in our area since the last 4 years or so, it's actually right in the middle of where all those bonds have been set. It's pretty it's pretty on par. It's pretty average with the bonds that have been set in this area for homicide suspects.
Your advice for everyone for tomorrow?
Well, I do not actually work for court security, but I'm familiar with a little bit about how it's going to go down tomorrow. There is a finite amount of space in the courtroom. I think the courtroom itself seats only about 75, but they are going to have some overflow seating with closed circuit television of the proceedings in a different room, an alternate room in the courthouse, and that one seats about 100 people. So about 175 people will actually be able to be inside, present, watching these proceedings as they go on. It's recommended that you leave any bags or purses or anything like that because there's going to be metal detectors. Court security will be on hand to make sure that no contraband or items are brought in. They will be enforcing a no talking rule. In fact, probably even a no whispering rule or any conversation within those rooms while these proceedings are going on. So it's going to be pretty well controlled, and it's my understanding it's going to occupy a good part of the day. The sentencing hearing actually starts at 9 a.m., and I believe it's scheduled to go all the way until about 5 in the evening. And my understanding is that they do plan on using most of that time.
Todd, before we go, any last word for the Hmong community?
I guess I would just say, I mean, I completely recognize, again, the strong feelings that people have about this case, particularly as it relates to race issues in our communities. And I do think that those are important conversations to have. Here at the police department, we really value our relationship with our Hmong community. We have a really great community to live in. And again, while I think it's important to have those conversations about improving race relations and understanding between different groups, I think using the Dylan Yang case as a platform to have that conversation, it probably isn't completely accurate because race did not factor at all in the decision to arrest or prosecute or convict Dylan Yang. Race wasn't a factor in this incident at all. The victim in this case was also of a minority group. Race never came up at all in any of these proceedings. And I understand, some people have come from the outside of Wausau rather, and they feel very strongly that this represents some type of commentary on the state of race issues here in the Wausau area. We've enjoyed really positive conversations lately with our local Hmong community, and we feel that has served to strengthen our understanding of each other and recognize that this is a terrible case in which a young person lost their life. It involves other juveniles. Many poor decisions were made that day, and we just want to prevent further tragedies from happening in our communities. One small component of this case involved alleged gang activity from Dylan Yang and from Isaiah Powell. They both claim to have had some type of membership with a group, and what we've seen in the aftermath of this incident is some continued altercations or confrontations between members from both of these groups. So while I don't want to say that this whole case hinged on gang activity, there's this component where there's two groups of kids who now have, at least they feel, a greater reason to dislike each other. So we want to make sure that we have enough law enforcement in the area to keep the streets safe. The courthouse is situated in the downtown area where a lot of the buses come into town after school. So we'll likely have some visible officer presence down there just to make sure that, as young people are coming into the downtown area that may have an interest in this case or may have an interest in causing some type of confrontation with another group, we want to make sure that we're there to head that off and keep people safe in our community.
Well, again, thank you for your time being here with us tonight to talk about a little bit about Dylan Yang's case on the Wausau Department Police side. And thank you for your time. Lúc cổ linh đu nút thì có chua cho anh sẽ có trò do nút là yo là chỉ polu chỉ đồ Dylan Yang nhớ trong Wausau, Wisconsin. cho nên chỉ cái tin trả thìจะพูดยืมบ้าmột cổ nèแล้วchỉ nhauยืมบ้าđi trả rồi đi trả
okay khỏi cái nó cái mà tất kia nó rồi từ cho phong cái na cái bộ lo bao nhiêu trong cái na trong cái khổng linh thôn để cho nó nhiều qua đi á chúng ta thả lô chúng ta thi họ những nên thi là nên thả lô thì cái tu tiên chỉ rõ lấy tụi cho nên hay là cái là cho nên tận nó không ạ mà mình nên cái tờ để cho thế này mùi thế này nông sữa chúng ta thi chúng ta thả số đông là trong cái trả hàng đó hay những cái chúng nó là nên tụi cho nên tôi chỉ nên tao hay á những cái này chúng nó là hay á
ý chỗ này chỉ cái tin trả thiết trong bây giờ mà cho xuân số tụ khán giả khó bảo ta là nơi cái sĩ thản cho ý tụi chẳng sự sơ chế cho tụi chẳng sự nhớ trong đồng Wausau, Wisconsin sĩ thản cho trong đời địa là gia trong plong thu cú giờ Rachel và Leva nó khai trong này xuân số tụ thế mà sĩ dữ